I went up, and so did Jerusha and Laura. We went up to the, we call them tar sands, but the Canadians call them oil sands, up there by Fort McMurray. And it's hard to get in and look at the site because they've got, of course, security and fences everywhere. But we can see a lot of oil pictures, or a lot of aerial pictures. And it's just mile after mile of devastation, basically. But they've got a museum in Fort McMurray. And, you know, this is fantastic, and they talk about how wonderful it is. And it's, boy, I'll tell you, it's helped their economy. You know, they got all these restaurants and hotels out in the middle of nowhere, but the long-term effect of that is they're poisoning water left and right. This stuff is so sludgy, you know, until they had fracking, until they did this new technique of getting the oil and gas out, it was never economically feasible. And then, but part of it is also our worldwide just, you know, need for continued new sources of oil and energy that we got to get away from. Yeah, the Fort McMurray trip was pretty amazing. Fracked gas, back to fracked gas. You probably know this, but methane is very different the way it responds in the atmosphere. It's much more powerful, up to 80 times more powerful than, as far as heating elements in the atmosphere, than CO2. It doesn't last as long as CO2, so it breaks down. It leaks, the methane leaks out of everywhere they're fracking it. You're creating leakage. And so when you have the areas in the Bakken and the areas back east, they could be containing it more, but it's highly expensive to contain it, and so they're required to, and so they don't put that investment into it. So it's pretty tragic to me that we're just releasing a whole bunch more greenhouse gas heating elements besides CO2 when we start using more and more gas. Now the gas, and I'll just tell you from the experience in Spokane, Avista has been convinced to get off coal, and they're on a route to do that in about 6 years. At least coal for the Spokane, for Washington. I think there's still going to be some coal energy, probably going to Idaho a little bit longer than that. So, and then how they'll account for that, they'll say, well, we produce this much electricity from hydro and this much from gas. And so the thing they're not ready to get off of and don't have a clue on how they're going to get off of, and it's unfortunate the word is called natural gas. We should have always just called it fossil fuel gas, because it's not natural, it's a fossil fuel. Anyway, this gas not only is being used more and more, it's replacing coal for electricity. And some people say, well, it's a bridge fuel. Well, when you burn natural gas, it does burn cleaner than coal, certainly. But then you still have that problem of methane escaping. And when you burn natural gas and combust it, it turns into carbon dioxide as well. It goes from methane to carbon dioxide. And so then you start thinking, and we're, in our sustainability committee in Spokane, we're actually going to try to hone in on at least get Vista to do more leak checks, because we think there's, you know, a certain percentage of leakage going on, and it's probably going on here in Moscow. All the, you know, how many of you have a natural gas heater? I do. And the alternative of electricity is often very expensive, and so you think about, okay, we need to, I keep my thermostat way down, but still, using natural gas. There's some potential to use biogas, and there's a couple sources for that. One, there's a woman, Kathleen Kinney in Spokane, who's working with the city and the county to actually develop biogas from our solid waste treatment plant, the solid residues. And so that's a potential, but how big could that be compared to the huge amount that comes through pipelines? You know, probably not so big. Natural gas, they can liquefy it and transport it on railroads. They don't do that very much. it mostly goes in pipelines. And we have, I mean, there's an incredible, you guys I'm sure have lots of pipelines going into Moscow. I don't know what your specific situation is, but there's proposals for new ones. Those are being fought. The Dakota Access Pipeline is being fought. We actually have a, it's gas, but it's gasoline pipeline called the Yellowstone Pipeline that runs right under the Spokane River and right through Spokane. And we're trying to now, because they have to renew their permit, we're trying to get them to move that. But literally from gasoline refineries, it goes into Spokane. And so I don't know if all your gasoline comes overland in a truck or how that happens, but it's always worth checking out. Wow, where is the energy flowing into Moscow? I could have done some research, but I didn't. But that's something you could probably look up and find out, or just talk to your local energy provider. So Vista, I mean, they're on this sustainability committee and they're smart. They need to keep an eye on things, and I think they spend some money on solar and they spend money on battery research, but they cannot even foresee how they're going to get rid of natural gas. In fact, it's probably going to increase because they'll have to do some peaking of fossil fuels, or that normally they would have used coal. Since they're not going to be using coal after 2025, they'll probably have some peaking plants, and those will probably be natural gas. So natural gas is a really tough one.
Is the Vista's wind energy supply pretty minuscule then in the overall picture of the energy itself?
It's there, but it's pretty small. And they just put up a solar facility near Lind, which is kind of, I don't know, it's just not in the Palouse, but it's out there by not Ellensburg, but Ritzville. And so, they're investing some money. And they had a program for residential, which I took part in, for $1,400 you could buy a solar panel. And then they build the array, and then they take off of my energy, whatever the solar panel was producing. And so for 5 years, and that actually worked out for me. I think I got $1,600 back from the $1,400 I spent. So they're trying some things, but is it at the scale that's going to make the big difference? I think, not sure about that, because I think the way you use a lot of heat is you have old leaky houses. Well, those tend to be in Spokane anyway. Those tend to be the rental houses. The owners have no incentive to do anything. The rental people just have to pay a high gas bill. They're not going to pay to get it insulated. So there's some structural challenges to reducing energy consumption. And older houses, it's almost like they're very expensive to outfit to do a substantial reduction in heat loss, or you can freeze. So it's not a simple situation. Laura wanted me to mention the Energy Information Administration. So if you want to know kind of the mix of fossil fuels for this area, for Idaho, Energy Information Administration, the EIA, can tell you that. There's a ton of information. And I talked about Montana Rail Link. Remember that some of these tar sands oils flow into the United States, and then they go out of here, out on the coast for refineries. So it's interesting, and you guys, some of you fought the megaloads that were going up over, was that Lobo Pass? Yeah. And that was equipment to help, build those tar sands fields. And so you've been intimately involved with, and now it's coming back down into the United States, and it's being, they have to treat it a little bit. It's so sludgy, they have to add more nasty chemicals to kind of loosen it up a little bit. Some of those are volatile. And then our vehicles. Hopefully there will be an era, and Norway's already on top of it. I think they're going to only sell electric vehicles after 2025. We're starting to move in that direction in this country with maybe a short 4-year back lapse during the administration. So we could potentially get off our transportation fix on oil. That means we gotta figure out a way to produce more clean electricity. Electric cars, turns out, are very efficient. The battery technology also uses rare earth metals, and you have to, there's a whole discussion of how you best recycle those lithium batteries, and can you reuse them. Lead batteries actually are one of the highest recycled products ever. They're like 99% recycled.
Is there a concern about the continuous source and availability of lithium? Like China's the big exporter of lithium.
Yeah, there's Bolivia and Chile have pretty good supplies in fairly pristine areas, though. So there's a whole issue of, are you going to mine stuff? I guess there's some up in Canada too, which I hadn't heard until just a week or two ago. But again, these are high-tech, kind of very rare substances that, like you say, China controls some of them. There's all these vanadium and other little things that gets used in electronics and electric cars that they aren't just sitting around in used car lots like steel is. So that presents a big challenge. So I was just talking about the Energy Information Administration, and I know it does have oil and gas production in the southwest part, and of course the coal and oil trains traveling through, but there's no coal mining. There used to be an old coal mine in Washington State, but it's shut down, and so there's no coal mining right now in the northwest, which is a good thing. And the Seattle utilities are also phasing out of the coal plants, so that's pretty good. And then I wanted to briefly mention, here's, I'll talk a bit about oil spill contingency plans, because we just went through a process in Washington State, and it's basically what happens when a truck or a oil tanker leaks. And it turns out that if they're a high volatility oil, which is the stuff that comes from the Bakken, you can't get near this stuff. You can catch on fire, you just got to get away from it. You can't put it out right away, it's so intensely hot. And there's a retardant you can use on it, but you use it all up in like 5 seconds. And so there's no, and so the contingency plans are kind of important to track, because that's where you can find alliances with firefighters and police departments who realize, wow, we are understaffed if an emergency happens. We don't have enough flame retardant. We don't have cleanup facilities. And those things are all show up in these oil contingency plans. So Laura spent a lot of time reading through the draft and getting a bunch of public comments, and there's been some meetings. And so we do have one that will probably go into place in Washington State, which probably wouldn't be a bad model for if Idaho decides to take this up. And they probably should, considering there's oil trains that flow through, luckily not Moscow, but right through Sandpoint and Bonner's Ferry. So instead of the Department of Ecology, you have the Department of Environmental Quality. And I've worked with some of those folks on some of the issues in the Coeur Lake Basin, some good folks in there. And then the local groups that were mentioned. But you kind of got to raise a stink about things. So if you're not too worried about what's happening in Moscow, but you have time and energy, the people in Sandpoint are pretty worried about it, and they need and could use some help for sure. See if there's anything else I'm missing here, because then we'll leave a few minutes for questions. Oh, through legislation, Washington now requires the railroads to have insurance in case of a spill up to $700 million. So that's the other angle is, what do they insure for? What if Burlington Northern goes off the tracks with some oil and it goes into the river? Do they have a big policy, or and you might be able to pressure your legislatures to say, wow, we don't want to get stuck with big bills, so maybe we should have the railroads do it. The challenge is always the interstate commerce clause, which railroads will always pull out in court and say, well, we can do whatever we want because it's federal authority that regulates us. So you have to be kind of aware of that. I think I'm going to leave it at that and see if you have questions or thoughts of your own. Again, I want to mention, if you're interested in finding out about that bridge, there's a petition there